The first book of the Maccabees, chapter 2. As it was in those days, so it is today, and that is, politicians and political candidates often attack the influence of the man of God in order to gain the trust of the sheep, so that they all may be led astray. In those days, Mattathias, the son of John, son of Simeon, who was a priest of the sons of Jorib, moved from Jerusalem and settled in Modin. He had 5 sons: John, surnamed Gadi; Simon, who was called Basi; Judas, who was called Maccabeus; Eleazar, called Abiran; and Jonathan, which was called Apphus. Now Mattathias saw the blasphemies being committed in Judah and Jerusalem, and he said, "Alas, why was I born to see this, the ruin of my people, the ruin of the holy city, and to dwell there when it was given over to the enemy, the sanctuary given over to aliens? Her temple has become like a man without honor. Her glorious vessels have been carried away into captivity. Her babes have been killed in her streets. Her youth by the sword of the foe. Why was I allowed to be born to see this? What nation has not inherited her palaces, has not seized her spoils? All her adornment has been taken away. No longer free, she's become a slave. And our holy place, our beauty, our glory, has been laid waste. The Gentiles have profaned it. Why should we live any longer?" And Mattathias and his sons tore their clothing, put on sackcloth, and mourned greatly. The king's officers, who were enforcing this apostasy, came to the city of Modin to make them offer sacrifice. And many of the church folks, Israel, came to them also. Mattathias and his sons were assembled. So the king's officers spoke to Mattathias and said, "Now you're a leader, honored and great in this city, and you're supported by sons and brothers. Now you come on here and show us what a great leader you are, and be the first to come and do what the king commands, as all the Gentiles and the men of Judah and those that are left in Jerusalem have done." Now, here we go with the typical promise of success and wealth, prosperity, a ministry that will grow and is supported by the government. These skanks, these snakes, calling themselves officers of the king, told Mattathias, "You and your sons will be numbered among the friends of the king, the president. And you and your sons will be honored with silver and gold and many gifts." These lying wonders. But you see, what these skanky danks didn't realize is that they had just stirred up a hornet's nest. They had just pissed off the man of God. You don't do that. Can you just imagine the sons of Mattathias looking at each other going, uh-oh? Because Mattathias raised his voice and answered these officers, "Even if all the nations that live under the rule of the king obey him, and have chosen to do his commandments, departing each one from the religion of his fathers, yet I and my sons and my brethren will live by the covenant of our fathers. Far be it from us to desert the law and the ordinance. We will not obey the king's word by turning aside from our religion to the right hand or to the left. Get out of here. No sooner than when Mattathias had finished speaking, one of these Jews that had been converted to skanky-dankism came forward in the sight of everybody to offer sacrifice upon the altar in Modin, as if he was going to show these people that it's okay, according to the king's command. But when Mattathias saw it, let me just pause for a second and tell you that I don't care how eloquently written, how politically correct, how 16th century English it is portrayed. Being pissed off is being pissed off. Becoming angry is becoming angry. Being filled with fury and wrath is being filled with fury and wrath. And Mattathias' heart burned with zeal, and his heart was stirred. He got mad. Somebody said, "Be angry, but sin not." Well, let me tell you something. Mattathias' zeal, his anger, was not of unrighteousness, but it was motivated by the ordinances and the keeping of the commands of God. Therefore, his anger was not of sin, but of righteousness. Before that man could complete his sacrilege, Mattathias ran to him and killed him. He killed him on the altar. At the same time, he killed the king's officer who was forcing them to sacrifice. Then he tore down that altar. He burned with zeal for the law, as Phinehas did against Zimri, the son of Salu. In his righteous rage, Mattathias yelled out, "Let everyone who is zealous for the law and supports the covenant come out with me." And he and his sons then fled to the hills and left all that they had in the city. Look at somebody and tell them, "I ain't no punk. I'm a warrior for Christ." The gloves were now taken off, because many who were seeking righteousness and justice went down to the wilderness to dwell there. They, their sons, their wives, their cattle, because evils pressed heavily upon them. Now, somebody ratted them out to the king's officers and to the troops in Jerusalem, the city of David, that men who had rejected the king's command had ran off down to the hiding places in the wilderness. Many pursued them and overtook them. They encamped opposite them and prepared for battle against them on the Sabbath day. They began to rail them, saying things like, "Enough of this. Come on out and do what the king commands, and you will live." But these saints answered and said, "We will not come out, nor will we do what the king commands," and so profane the Sabbath day. So when these Jews that had been converted to skanky-dankism and the troops of the king who were enforcing this apostasy of this ecumenical style paganistic worship understood that these people of God were going to they had made their stand. They were not going to be moved. Okay? They hastened to attack them. In these modern times, you have been presented alternatives to sanctification and holiness. The enemy has given you the opportunity to change your mind. But when the enemy of God understands that you will not be moved, you will obey the ordinances and the covenant of God, he has hastened to bring about your demise. He has hastened to destroy you even today. These disciples of the law of God made no further comments. They didn't answer them. They didn't take up arms, hurl a stone at them, block up or shore up their hiding places. For they together as one said, "Let us all die in our innocence. Heaven and earth testify for us that you are killing us unjustly." There was no band of angels sitting on top of a mountain. Gabriel didn't show up with a heavenly host to deliver them. They stood as one in faith, depending on God, rather than going down known as a victim of a corrupt government. They stood as a testimony of the power of God, of the covenant of God with his people. So on that faithful Sabbath day, they were attacked and they died with their wives and their children and their cattle. The number of those who perished on that day was 1,000 persons. They were not raptured. They were not hidden. They were killed for the sake of righteousness, just as we will be today. Now, when Mattathias and his friends learned of this, they mourned for them. They mourned deeply. And they began to speak among themselves, saying, "If we all do as our brethren have done and refuse to fight with the Gentiles for our lives and our ordinances, they will quickly destroy us from the earth." So, on that day, they made this decision: let us fight against every man who comes to attack us on the Sabbath day. Let us not all die as our brethren died in their hiding places. My friends, there will come a time in your life that you too must make the decision to destroy the enemy of your lifestyle, to destroy the enemy of your faith before they destroy you. Once God's people made up in their minds to stand and fight together, they were joined by other mighty warriors of Israel, everyone who had offered himself willingly for the law, and all of them who had become fugitives to escape their troubles joined them and reinforced them. They organized an army and struck down sinners in their anger and lawless men in their wrath. The survivors fled to the Gentiles for safety. Mattathias and his friends went about and tore down the altars. They forcibly circumcised all the uncircumcised boys that they found within these borders of Israel. They hunted down these arrogant men, and the work prospered in their hands. They rescued the law out of the hands of the Gentiles and the kings, and they never let the sinner gain the upper hand again. Now the days drew near for Mattathias to die. So he called his sons about him and said, "Arrogance and reproach have now become strong. It is a time of ruin and furious anger. Now, my children, show zeal for the law and give your lives for the covenant of our fathers. Remember the deeds of the fathers which they did in their generations, and receive great honor and everlasting name. Was not Abraham found faithful when tested, and it was reckoned to him as righteousness? Joseph, in the time of his distress, kept the commandment and became Lord of Egypt. Phinehas, our father, because he was deeply zealous, received the covenant of everlasting priesthood. Joshua, because he fulfilled the command, became a judge in Israel. Caleb, because he testified in the assembly, received an inheritance in the land. David, because he was merciful, inherited the throne of the kingdom forever. Elijah, because of his great zeal for the law, was taken up into heaven. Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael believed and were saved from the flame. Daniel, because of his innocence, was delivered from the mouth of the lions. And so observe from generation to generation that none who put their trust in God will lack strength. Do not fear the words of a sinner, for his splendor will turn into dung and worms. Today he will be exalted, but tomorrow he will not be found, because he has returned to the dust, and his plans will perish. My children, be courageous and grow strong in the law, for by it you will gain honor." Mattathias continued, saying, "I know that Simeon, your brother, is wise in counsel. Always listen to him. He shall be your father. Judas Maccabees has been a mighty warrior from his youth. He shall command the army for you and fight the battle against these wicked peoples. You shall rally about you all those who observe the law and avenge the wrong done to your people. Pay back the Gentiles in full and heed what the law commands." Mattathias then blessed them and was gathered to his fathers. He died in the 146th year and was buried in the tomb of his fathers at Modin. End of chapter 2 of the first book of the Maccabees.